Hello, I'm Chris Kaladikis, ICT teacher, YouTuber, and founder of Maximum Education.
I'm Robert Namoski. I run the Tuition Centre and the Martial Arts Centre, and we're very pleased today to welcome our next guest. Welcome, Kim, to our podcast. And just a little bit about yourself, Kim. How'd you get into teaching, and what do you enjoy about it?
Okay, so it's funny you say that because I had a conversation with my son today who was talking to me about him going to uni, and he said, oh yeah, what did you study again at uni? I said, I studied human movement and health education. And he said, okay. And he goes, oh yeah, well, why'd you get into that? And I said, I don't know, I just got into it because I got the marks and I wanted to go to Sydney Uni because it was down the road from me. So I just went there and I was going to go and do business. And he goes, oh yeah, so why'd you become a teacher? I actually liked it. And I just stayed at it. I'm not sure why, but I did. But anyway, I was teaching for 17 years and then I bridged out and I took a role in health. And so I also do work in health. So I am actually gone back teaching this year, 1 day a week. So I work in health and I also work in schools. So it's a bit of a mixture.
Okay, and with that, Kim, today we've obviously got here for a very important topic, which you think is on a lot of parents' minds. A lot of young people don't know the fact. Your career is kind of taken to be an expert in the area of vaping and what's kind of going on in schools and the programs you're kind of setting up with students in schools in conjunction with those schools. How did your pathway through health and teaching kind of land you in this subcategory? What brought you to that area of vaping?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. So first thing I'm going to say, I'm not really an expert, so that's one thing I know.
Compared to us, you are.
There's so much out there that I can still learn, but what I am, I guess, well versed in is in terms of what works with young people and what works in terms of behaviour change. Yeah. So we know that a lot of things out there are all about awareness and knowledge change, and that's good. Yeah. But it's really not going to make the biggest difference. What we really need is behaviour change. And so that's something that I'm actually quite well versed in. Now I can forget the rest of your question. It was very good.
It was a very good question.
I just got myself caught up.
How did your career kind of lead to this area that got you into this area of vaping?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I've always believed that health and education have to come together. That if we are really serious about addressing health issues with young people, we can't be in silos. So we can't have education over here doing this and then health messaging over here doing this. That in fact, if we are serious about empowering our young people to make positive health choices and behaviours, we need to work together. And so it was just a natural fit for me when I went into health. So that was the first thing. And as part of that, working in health, I really value schools because I've come from schools. And so when we work in schools with another one of our huge projects, which is again about prevention of health issues, we don't want to have kids hospitalised. So well, not kids, in the future be hospitalised. So our programs are all about, preventing hospitalisations. And so we do meet with our schools regularly and we have conversations with them. So it's a real partnership, it's a collaboration. And we will ask questions. And so it was really during the COVID era. And we remember the COVID era. We're going into schools every now and then. We're asking, different people at the school, executive, like, how's everything going? What's your number one concern? And what we found really interesting is that during that time in that late 2020, early 21, it wasn't COVID. Yeah. It was vaping.
Is it that prominent?
That was the concern of the principals and the executive. And so that's when we said, well, this is something we've heard. Well, let's do something about this. And what can we do? So you went back, you read the literature, you see what's out there. We saw within the Australian context, there wasn't a whole lot at that time going on, but the Americans, they were really far into it. So we saw some of their really good programs. So they've got something called the Truth Initiative, and that's a fantastic program. They've got something called Catch My Breath, which is also another program that works or runs in schools. and it's that peer education model, and that's what we do very well. So we were really interested in what they were doing. But then we realised in the Australian context, it's no good just to go, here, we've got a program, we've got to go in and run it. You had to find out what was going on. So you have to stop and you actually have to listen. You have to engage people. And so we decided that we would listen, and that we would listen to 3 groups at a school, and that all, parents, students, and school staff, and would ask them the questions, not go in and tell them as experts, but just listen to what they have to say and take that all back in. Well, actually what we found by listening, people felt acknowledged. They felt appreciated, particularly the students. When we went back and spoke to the students about how did you like the process, they said, well, at least you weren't lecturing us for an hour in the library, because if you did that, it would have gone in one ear, out the other. And they said also in their groups that it was good because they could all be together and they could listen to one another, because it was different when they were listening to their peers than being told by someone who doesn't know what it's really like. And so we really thought, okay, well, we're on something good here. This is great. We've got this listening data. And then we're at the next stage. And that's, what can we do? What will our program be? And so that's, basically how it all started and how we got into it.
As a parent and as teachers, I don't think we're quite informed as to the extent of vaping and the dangers. And for us in particular, what would be the difference between vaping and cigarettes? Because back in our time, kids would light up a cigarette around the corner, etc. But now vaping seems to be the next thing that has replaced that rebellious sort of behaviour with cigarettes. So what is the difference or the dangers from cigarettes to vaping?
Yeah, and that's it's actually something that, kids always have that rebellious nature, right?
Yes.
So they like to, go against the grain. It's youth culture, right? Taking risk. What will it lead to, whether that's negative or positive risk? And unfortunately, it's one of those negative risks. But, some of the things and the features of vapes that are really concerning, which I'm sure everyone knows, is they're so discreet. They can have it and then just put it away and no one knows. They hide it and conceal it so well. And so that's one of the concerns. But there's so many more concerns with them. It's like, does anyone even know how many puffs they're actually taking? Because unlike a cigarette that's finite, we know that it has, I don't know, I've never counted how many puffs someone takes when they smoke, but it stops and then that cigarette's done. This, there's 3,500 counts. There's more counts in one vape. And so is anyone actually counting how many times they're vaping? I know I've watched people at traffic lights and I've counted people, and I feel like they've probably taken more puffs than they would have if they had a cigarette, because it's just so easy to do.
So that's the biggest danger, the actual volume of tobacco in your system. But is there anything else in the vape that's more dangerous than the cigarette?
Yeah, well, one of the actually most dangerous things is similar to our cigarettes, is nicotine. And the impact that nicotine can have also on the brain and on the developing, and that's the concern with adolescents. So we know that, the impact of nicotine on the developing brain is not something that's, skewed towards beneficial to them. We know that it can impact that. So that's one concern, and the way in which it's taken up, the nicotine compared to the cigarette is a little bit different. So the delivery system, I believe, is a little bit faster, but there are a lot of experts in that area that know a whole lot more about that, because that's what they're actually trained in.
Yeah, and that's kind of the big battle there too, isn't it? Okay, we understand nicotine and we understand the addictive nature of nicotine that's been around, but what are these other chemicals? That's the big mystery that kids take for granted.
It seemed to be a certain point in time where cigarettes were really dropped down in terms of their use.
It was such a win for our culture.
It was almost like, oh wow, this is a thing of the past. And now, just overnight, it seems to be our biggest issue.
I mean, could it be coincidental or perhaps orchestrated by our lovely tobacco companies?
Conspiracy theories here.
It makes sense.
They're losing profit, and then all of a sudden we've got this other product
out there
that's replacing another product.
So how did it come into play, vaping?
I don't necessarily know the history. You know, I've heard sketchy history. You know, it was invented by someone who wanted to help their parent stop vaping. So I believe it's been around for actually quite a long time.
Yeah.
But it's the popularized version of that. And when did it become so popularized? And we know that in America they've been dealing with this for a while. I can't even quote how long, but you would have heard of Juul. I mean, that was on Netflix. They had that big Juul special on Netflix. And then we have the Australian context. We know that probably around that COVID era, the problematic rise of it started to come through, which is, and impacting our young people. And that's the biggest concern. Yeah. So we don't want to see a new generation come through and be impacted like the generation of yesteryear.
Well, that's it, you know, and you really have pinpointed it in saying that, because I actually remember before the first period of remote learning happened at school, that, the students were coming back and, there was a change. Like, some came back with horrible coughs and it started to become massive issues in all the schools. And, it was during that first lockdown period. And then it happened again in the second lockdown period as well. It's, it's so horrible that, because I guess it was so unregulated and no one could watch them, and obviously parents were trying to do their work. So that's the hobby that kids decided to take up, which is just horrible.
So from your opinion, as a school, as teachers, what's the thing that we can do? Talk to the kids, or what do you recommend?
I guess prevention is always key.
Yeah.
We want to prevent anyone from, taking up this habit. So, but I've heard them say, even primary school kids.
Oh, wow.
We've heard that, they've had some problems in primary school. But, the younger that we can have these conversations in high school, the better.
Yeah.
So obviously it is part of the PDHP curriculum, and speaking to kids and being open and honest about it.
Yeah.
But I guess the main thing is getting them to develop the messages, getting them to be the ones that come up with, some sort of message around vaping, as in, it's not something that you want to do, getting them to develop, whether it's a poster or a video, whatever it is, but they're coming up with that message and then they're giving that message.
A bit of ownership there, and a part of the school culture, and having their own voice in relation to it, because obviously it pertains to their generation at the school. That's a great idea. Yeah,
no, definitely. We found that youth voice is so important when we're speaking about stuff like this, because again, that top-down approach with young people doesn't work, it goes in one ear, out the other. But if they have to come up with it and deliver the message themselves, they're way more likely to listen to it.
Yeah, well, that's good. Look, these are ideas we can take on board with us.
Yeah, definitely. Because this is, as teachers, this is new to us completely. Yeah. It's something where we would naturally classify it as a new and improved cigarette. But as you said, the dangers are quite different. I mean, quite more alarming than an actual cigarette. So as teachers, we've got to kind of come to the realization of that. It's not just a cigarette behind some sort of building where they're coming through. The impact seems to be very scary and very alarming.
Yeah, and even just what you said on the metrics, I didn't even think of that with vaping, that, a cigarette is finite.
Yeah.
And then, the amount of puffs they're taking, like that probably goes beyond even a whole pack of cigarettes within a canister that they're putting into their vape. So that's just crazy. Thinking along those lines of cigarettes as well, then, like with smoking, there's passive smoking. Is that a similar case with vaping? Is there passive vaping?
Yeah, there is something called passive vaping. There was a really good article last year in The Conversation. So I think you guys all know the publication, The Conversation. And it was all about passive vaping, because yes, it can play an impact. But there's also something, I think the term's called third-hand vaping, which just basically also means, and it's something that I'm not going to speak a lot to, I'm just going to put the term out there, is if you're in a room and you're vaping and that residue sits on a chair, and then you leave and you have children around and they come into the room and they sit on that chair, there is something where they think that can still impact as well. So in terms, if I go back to passive vaping, I know for myself, it's one of those things. I mean, I have some friends, right? I remember this. They wouldn't smoke inside the house because no one would. That's taboo. You don't smoke inside the house. It's actually shameful, right?
Yeah.
Then the vapes came to popularity. And then I went to their place, and then they're all sitting around a table and they're all vaping. And I'm just like, well, what do I say? I don't know. I don't want to be in the nanny state all the time, the bossy parents all the time. So whatever, just suck it up. But I got the worst rash on my chin all the way down to my chest. I don't know if that's coincidental or if that's something as an impact of this, because it's not. People go, it's just water.
Yeah.
It's not. It's an aerosol. It's like, imagine deodorant, and you're spraying deodorant, and that's what's coming out. So it's an irritant. It's not this harmless thing that some people make it out to be. No, it's not. So I don't know. I think that potentially that was definitely a case of passive vaping. On my behalf.
And having a reaction to it. And it's funny you said that too, because like with cigarettes, they had a stench, you know, it's the smell, that yucky tar kind of smell. But with the vapes, they smell like watermelon. And people think, oh, then, you know, it's more probably socially acceptable to do indoors, which, you know, is probably their reason for justifying it in that case. And, you know, it's so funny because one of the worst smelling places ever in a school was obviously the bathrooms. And then it was funny, and I bet you're thinking where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
You walk into the stinkiest part, it actually smells like watermelon in the school toilets. Like, you so know what's going on. And it
you know
great.
exactly.
Yeah, but it's the exact opposite thing. Like, it's a nice smell, but it's obviously this horrible thing that's happening in there, and, you know, that's destroying them. But I think that's a bit of the too, why people think they can just do it wherever they want. You know, it's all okay. Oh, it smells nice.
Naturally, if it smells nice, it has to be good for you.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
I mean, if it looks fruity.
That's right.
On the package.
Yeah.
Then it's fine.
And I guess, does that then bring it back to how then it can be targeted at kids? It's like the lolly cigarette then, isn't it?
Well, that's right. There's a whole breadth of information about how they specifically targeted young people with that marketing. You know, if you think about it, the colours and then the fruity flavours, you know, all those things that seem appealing. And then also the lack of warning on those packages. There wasn't anything that really said nicotine is contained in this. And so it was that belief that, you know, they're nicotine free, you know, they're fine for me. And then with the testing of the vapes that was done, and there was a report released last year by New South Wales Health, that actually it was a very high percentage. I can't quote the actual percentage, but it was high 90%. That had nicotine in the vapes.
That's literally criminal.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, you know, you've got nicotine in a product that you're not disclosing.
Yeah.
And you're actually selling it, and it smells nice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as criminal gets. Like, you can't. There's no way around it. Would there be a lawsuit to it, or?
Yeah.
Is anyone looking into that? Because it's unbelievable that cigarettes have the package with all this horrific imaging. Now you've got a product that smells nice with nicotine in there, and you're not even disclosing that there's nicotine in there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is beginning. The more we get into it, this conversation's it's getting more and more scary.
Well, that's how it's grown, hasn't it?
Yeah,
The
really.
lack of previous lack of regulation and no one knowing the facts, which is what's got people thinking like, oh yeah, this is better than smoking, and kind of having people thinking it's the safer option, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's where the government really stepped in, and that's why we've got the disposable vapes being now banned in Australia. So that was something that was taken very seriously, I know. That when the government came in with Mark Butler, our health minister, our federal health minister.
Oh, great.
And I know that they took that really. And so, and that's why I saw a billboard that I referenced to you earlier outside of this conversation that said, Albo, the vape ban won't work. It will hurt. Stop this now.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting that, you know, that's such a huge billboard put up there with these words.
In a prime location too, wasn't it? Yeah.
And why? Because, you know, is it about keeping people healthy and safe, or is this about maybe money's going to be lost from this?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's an unfortunate thing we're seeing now. So regulation has kind of come in, and you know, last December I believe it was that vaping is now treated just like smoking in public places. It's fully banned. But yeah, I was on social media the other day, and just up in my feed, a group known as the RVA Association were out there saying, adults, we need to have our say in relation to vaping, and we should have our rights in relation to vaping. But it's bigger than that, isn't it? Like, it's very, you know, narrow-minded for these people to be putting that kind of stuff first. I don't know, how does that make you feel that there's now people on the other side trying to combat to keep vaping?
Yeah, I guess that's the adult like you said, for me, my lane is the adolescents.
Yes, of course.
And working with the young people. And I know that it's something that we don't want to see them have to deal with. So definitely happy when those laws come into play. I thought that was really brave of our government to, you know, courageous to step forward and take that stand and really put those into play and banning those.
I know, because we all know how politics works, and of course that would lead to obviously groups then targeting the government. But yeah, you're right, they did take a good firm stance on that. And yeah, it's for our young people who we're trying to protect and who we're trying to support.
Young people then chucking the cost on Medicare.
Yeah.
And like we were talking previously, I mean, what will be the long-term effects of this?
Yeah.
I mean, have we got a generation that we've actually gone backwards in terms of their healthcare? What is the research on that, or what's happened? Is there any long-term projection as to what will be the outcome of this phenomena?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are some papers that have been released talking about the long-term effects that it can have. You know, one of them talking about it can actually lead to the onset of asthma. But again, that's probably more the medical professionals that are very, you know, like our respiratory physicians that are really across all of that. I just know that it's something that is of concern. But again, if we can all work together, you know, education, health, the government making that brave stand, and we can focus on how this is going to be good for our young people, then I think we're in the right path. I know we're on the right path then.
So as, you know, obviously in this podcast, we've got parents listening in as well, not just students. What's your recommendation to parents? Like, how would they approach the subject of vaping to their children? Or let's say if they do notice their child smelling very fruity.
I thought that's a problem.
Right.
Yeah. What's
you
your...
smell nice.
You smell... Wait a second. What's your recommendation? What kind of talk do parents need to have with their children? What would be, you think, the best approach?
Yeah, I think actually in a couple of weeks or next week, Victoria Health is going to be releasing something specifically on this, which will be very handy on parents talking to their young people. I know that we all there's also some like stuff out there already, but I guess the best thing is that if you can be open and honest with your kids, and also, you know, not accuse them, but just ask them, you know, have you heard about this? What do you think about this? And then hopefully they'll come back and be able to speak to you. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I've been working in this for a few years, and I know one of my sons said, yeah, I had a vape at a party, and I was like, but you know what I do? Yeah. You know that? He goes, oh, well, I just got caught up, you know? And that's the hard thing is, you know, balancing that all out, even with all the information. Young people sometimes do make dumb decisions, but it's that support of that person, you know, and I know that he hasn't vaped since. Well, that's what he tells me. But again, it's just that open and honest, being, you know. So
be preemptive before the vaping starts.
Yeah.
So it should be, it's that big of a topic where, okay, your child starts high school, or do you think in primary school where, okay, we need to have this conversation because this is really becoming a phenomenon now.
Yeah. And the win in that conversation with your son is that he does know what you do, and he still said he did it to you.
Yeah.
So that's excellent that he did that.
Yeah.
You know, to still feel comfortable saying to you, I tried it, and obviously then he was able to talk to you about it. And, you know, that shows that he does obviously know and respect it. But yes, there'll always be the challenge of being a teenager, social pressures, and, you know, that's a rite of passage we all go through, isn't it? It's just now that vaping's a part of that now, and we've got to educate our kids in that.
Yeah, that's right. And just hoping that they make that choice. But yeah, just building the rapport with your kids. You know, but it's as you guys would know, it starts before.
Well, before,
you know?
yes, that's right.
It's like you just got to be there for them, and love be unconditional, not based on, you know, certain things that they do, but always being there for them.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I guess as well, bringing back to what you said, Rob, too, like projecting forward and we're kind of trying to analyze like what's this going to lead to. Our reference point, I guess, is how smoking kind of went. And, you know, it's funny because our generation was probably is between the smoking generation and the vaping generation, having to quit, you know, and the battles they kind of went through. But obviously they kind of didn't know as well when they started just kind of where vaping is right now. But then as they started getting towards their 40s and all that, yeah, like early heart attacks and, you know, lung cancer and all of that started happening. And I think that's what makes it really sad for us to see that we can kind of see the seeds of that starting again right now. And we know where it kind of leads, but yeah, the data is not all there yet. And then unfortunately, we will see long-term health issues, won't we?
Well, we don't want to use, every time something new comes along, like we mentioned previously, there is a generation that is the example of what not to do.
Exactly.
So is it going to be this generation or is it going to be the next generation? But there always is that one where you look back and go, yeah, they did it quite wrong.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned to my kids at the school, you know, the Queen was Queen for 70 years. But I asked them why. And no one knew. Well, Dad died of cigarette smoking very young. And then that's why she reigned for 70 years. And it's like, well, his generation really suffered with cigarettes because the doctors were giving it as for stress relief. And it's, well...
The Marlboro Man.
The Marlboro Man, yeah, that's right. Now, will you be the generation where your kids and grandkids look at you and go, well, there's a whole bunch of 50-year-olds with severe asthma.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on those breathing machines at that age, and that's why we start here. But we want to stop that. So that's the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're battling right now.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want this same history to repeat itself, you know, especially for our children. Now, with that in mind, let's say I do have a student come up to me at school and they've asked me, can you give me advice on how can I quit vaping? What would you recommend or who would you refer them to?
Yeah, so there's a few different, I guess, strategies out there. So first of all, you can always recommend the Quit Line. I know that they have a specific section now to help young people quit vaping as well. Sometimes they don't want to necessarily ring up, but have those phone conversations. So there's also the New South Wales Health put out a cessation guide. And one of the strategies in there is called the R strategy. So that's ask, advise, and help. And so that will talk you through the steps. So you'd be able to, you know, speak that young person through those steps and applying those strategies. And there's also something that's quite a good tool that comes out of actually Queensland. It's called Dovetail, and it's the Vape Check. And that's a tool that really just steps them through where they're at and then provides them some sort of, I guess, support on how to quit. So some strategies. One thing that I find really interesting is that when we've heard from young people, one of the main reasons they actually vape is for stress, what you said before with cigarettes, stress relief and mental health. And so I think one of the most important things, and I know one of the most important things is alternatives, and speaking about alternatives even when we're talking about vaping as a prevention. You know, if I am stressed, these are some things I can do. Go for a run, you know, join a sports team, you know, play an instrument, you know, sing. I could go speak to a trusted adult. I'll go talk to a friend. I think there's so many strategies that can be used and alternatives, and it's just making them aware of that and upskilling them in that so that they hopefully have that in their head, and then they, you know, they choose that as opposed to choosing a vape.
Yeah, replace a negative habit with a positive habit.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's something us teachers that we can kind of be aware of and probably get that conversation flowing.
Yeah, I've got to write down that R strategy. Ask, advise, and help.
Yeah, if you look at New South Wales Health, it's the cessation guide to quitting. It's quite a comprehensive tool, but if you pick it apart, you'll find that some really good strategies in there. And then the other one that's actually a lot of people really like is that Dovetail one, the Vape Check. They find that really user-friendly in terms of how it can guide the conversation with the young person needing help.
That's excellent. Just kind of as we start approaching the end, what would be your final word on vaping? If you could get a message out to the young people, you know, or to parents who are seeking guidance, what would be your final word in that area?
My final word is actually just getting the young people, again, coming back to youth voice, getting them to come up with the messages, the peer-led messages. We know the peer-led approach works because they see that peer as being more relevant to them. You know, as much as I think I'm relevant and funny, apparently I'm not.
Don't we all wish that?
The younger person apparently is better than I am. So, you know, I think that really helps. But not only that, I think everyone knows when you go to teach someone something, you learn it more.
Yes.
And you understand it more.
Yep.
It's like I'm trying to teach one of my sons how to drive, and all of a sudden I'm understanding why I put my foot on the brake here or why I turn the wheel like this, because I'm having to teach it. So it's the same sort of concept. So if we can get them to come up with the messages and share the messages, I think what we're going to see is that shift, and they become the ones that are, you know, again, out there as, you know, influencing the others. And the other thing I've got to say on it is just want to emphasize that actually the vast majority of our young people do not vape.
Yeah.
So we've got more than 80% of our young people that do not vape, and that's the positive thing.
Oh, that's excellent.
So
Awesome.
we need that 80% to reach the 20% and not the 20% to reach the 80%.
Yeah.
And so it's just shifting the lens on that conversation. Again, if we can just use youth voice there, they share the messages, I think that's where we're going to see the wins.
Yeah, oh, that's excellent.
That's great advice for leaders like yourself at a school.
Oh, definitely, you know, for the students to get that out and, you know, as I said before, own that, you know, and actually know how to approach their peers about that. Like, that's a fantastic success. I've actually ended up writing down more things. You've said you give me some absolute gold to go back to work with, which I appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. This was well informative, and we're really looking forward to having you on as a guest.
Yeah, thank you for giving up your 9 to 9 being with us tonight.
No
Kim.
worries.
Great.
I got my noodles, so I'm all good.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks for listening to the Educational Podcast tonight. I'm Chris Kaladikis.
I'm Robin Amoski.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
No worries. Thank you.